hairdo does kind of look like N again. So I don't know. Maybe time travel is coming back. Go Celebi, maybe? I don't know. Legends Johto? I don't know, man. Now we have Pokopia news. So from April 29th to May 14th, you got to get red crystal fragments in the Saberlight Gem Hunt event and exchange them for building its furniture and more. So in case you guys want to get updated on the new Pokopia news, but thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys hype it up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on notifications. We have so much to talk about. I just cannot wait for what's happening next. We are still going to get more releases. And if you guys are really watching this far in the video, comment down below airplane. Just the word airplane. Hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic day. I'll see you in the next one.
Greetings, Boogie fans! Michael here, and I read through every single Dex entry in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and compiled a list of all the ones that I thought were worthy of note, due to being disturbing, funny, crazy, weird, interesting, new info about old Pokemon, or whatever else. This is all of them. Meowscarada's Scarlet entry says this Pokemon uses the reflective fur lining its cape to camouflage the stem of its flower, creating the illusion that the flower is floating. I thought this was kind of fun and interesting because they definitely just could have had the flower be floating, but instead it's like, no, it's actually an illusion. Crocalore's Scarlet entry says, the combination of Crocalore's fire energy and overflowing vitality has caused an egg-shaped fireball to appear on the Pokemon's head. I am one of, I'm sure, many people who thought it was just wearing a sombrero, which I feel like it's still intended to kind of look like that, but the fact that it's an egg in a bird's nest is interesting, and I don't fully understand it, because I'm not sure what that has to do with crocodiles. Skeledirge's Scarlet entry says, the fiery bird changes shape when Skeledirge sings. Rumor has it that the bird was born when the fireball on Skeledirge's head gained a soul. So the egg hatches, and it now is just like another being that's part of Skeledirge. There's gotta be some lore that explains this, but right now it's so confusing. Quaxly's Scarlet entry says, this Pokemon migrated to Paldea from distant lands long ago. The gel secreted by its feathers repels water and grime. When Quaxly was first announced, a lot of people said, oh, why make this? It's just like Ducklet. But this indicates that Quaxly came from elsewhere, so maybe it used to be Ducklet and evolved into Quaxly once it was in Paldea, because there's no Ducklet in Paldea. Quaxly's Violet entry says, its strong legs let it easily swim around even in fast-flowing rivers. It likes to keep things tidy and is prone to overthinking things. This isn't any crazy lore, it's just like, I knew I liked Quaxly, he's just like me. Tarantula's Scarlet entry says, the ball of threads wrapped around its body is elastic enough to deflect the scythes of Scyther, this Pokemon's natural enemy. I always find it interesting when a Dex entry mentions a new relationship between Pokemon that we didn't know about before. So the fact that Scyther attacks Tarantula, I just think that's fun. Well, not fun. It's bad for Tarantula. Or is it, because it deflects it? Before we move on to the next entry, quick favor to ask you, would you subscribe? That'd be great. Lots of fun Pokemon videos on the way. Hoppip's Scarlet entry says, this Pokemon is blown across vast distances by the wind. It is unclear where the Hoppip of Paldea originally came from. Then its Violet entry says, outside of cold regions, Hoppip can be found practically everywhere. This is because the wind carries this species all over the world. At some point, I'd be interested to see where Hoppip originally came from. A theory that I have is that eventually we'll get a regional Hoppip that's in the region where it started from, and that form is original Hoppip, and all the pink ones that went all over the world just evolved to be lighter and carried on the wind. Skiploom's Scarlet entry says, Skiploom enthusiasts can apparently tell where a Skiploom was born by the scent drifting from the flower on the Pokemon's head. I just think this is kind of silly. Like, no, yes, this is definitely from Johto.
I'm a Skipperoo enthusiast.
Jumpluff's Scarlet entry says, Jumpluff travels on seasonal winds. Once its cotton spores run out, its journey ends, as does its life. Okay, this isn't like crazy, you know? If the fire goes out on a Charmander's tail, it dies. Once the spores run out on a Jumpluff, it dies. But like, maybe consider not having your Jumpluff use cotton spore, because it seems you might be expediting its demise. Fletchling's Violet entry says, Fletchling can be found in both rural and urban areas. They once had a huge territorial dispute with Squawkabilly. Fights broke out all over town. Another interesting relationship between a new Pokemon and an older one, and also I wish I could see that from a safe distance. Talonflame's Scarlet entry says it has top-notch flying capabilities. It flies around easily even while carrying prey that weighs more than 220 pounds. This stood out to me because why is it so oddly specific? Why 220 instead of a more round number like 200? I looked up some Pokemon that weigh around 220 pounds, and two that stood out were Venusaur and Tropius. Is Talonflame preying on Venusaur and Tropius, and then somehow carrying their enormous carcasses? Gumshoe's Violet entry says, Gumshoe specializes in relentlessly tracking down prey. The simple-minded Skwovet doesn't seem to provide Gumshoe enough challenge. First off, random shade thrown towards Skwovet, but then also I just think it's funny that Gumshoe needs the challenge, you know? He's not fulfilled by preying on simple prey, you know? It's kind of like Demona. Skwovet's Scarlet entry says it stores berries in its cheeks. When there are no berries to be found, Skwovet will stuff pebbles in its cheeks to stave off its cravings. This is cute and funny, but also kinda sad. Next, I wanna talk about Vivillon. Vivillon has a bunch of different forms originally determined by the real-world region of the 3DS it was caught in. Scarlet and Violet add entries for all those different forms for the first time, but they all basically say the same thing, just swapping out the description of where it's from based on the form of Vivillon. But the entry that stands out to me is Vivillon's Fancy form, a form previously only obtainable through an event back in 2014 and no other time, but is now the only form you can get in Paldea. The Scarlet entry says the patterns on this Pokemon depend on the climate and topography of the land it was born in. This form is from a mysterious land. So not only were those fancy form Vivillons from that event almost a decade ago coming from Paldea, which makes you wonder if they had started any planning for Scarlet and Violet at that point in time, but also, why is the Dex calling it a mysterious land? We're standing in the middle of it. It's not that mysterious anymore. Corviknight's Scarlet entry says Corviknight cannot serve as a taxi service in Paldea because the Pokemon's natural predators will attack it while it flies, endangering the customer. First off, I think it's strange that this giant metal bird has any predators at all, but also we know what that predator is. We have to go out of order here in the decks for a little bit, but that predator is Tinkaton. Its Scarlet entry says this intelligent Pokemon has a very daring disposition. It knocks rocks into the sky with its hammer, aiming for flying Corviknight. And then if you look closely, the color of Tinkaton's hammer, what does it remind you of? Tinkaton is striking Corviknight out of the sky and ripping the metal off its body to make its freaking hammer. This creature is an enemy of Team Sky! Speaking of Team Sky, the Team Sky merch at mnjtvmerch.com has sold out. Thank you guys so much for picking those up, but we do have some Mighty Base Form plushies left as we ordered more of these than the shirts. So if you want to pick one up, we're selling them till they sell out. mnjtvmerch.com. Paldean Wooper's Scarlet entry says after losing a territorial struggle, Wooper began living on land. The Pokemon changed over time, developing a poisonous film to protect its body. I always love when they explain why the change in form occurred for a regional variant, so I think this is fun. But also I wonder, who was the territorial struggle with? Clodsire's Scarlet entry says, when attacked, this Pokemon will retaliate by sticking thick spines out from its body. It's a risky move that puts everything on the line. During my Scarlet playthrough, I read that Dex entry and then proceeded to immediately see those spines come out, which was quite shocking. Oh, the spines. I have since learned that Clodsire is based on the Iberian ribbed newt, which is a creature that will puncture its own skin with its rib bones to act as a defense mechanism, which means those Clodsire spikes might be its bones. Bounsweet's Violet entry says, a greedent drawn in by the sweet scent of these Pokemon will tuck the Bounsweet in among the berries in its tail and carry them all away. This is funny to me, but also I'm just like, that Bounsweet's gonna get dropped off once the greedent realizes it's not a berry, and then it's gonna be like, how do I get home? I barely have legs. Steeny's Scarlet entry says, Steenie spreads a sweet scent that makes others feel invigorated. This same scent is popular for antiperspirants. First off, I would wear some Steenie antiperspirant. It'd be really funny to just walk around and people smell me and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And then Steeny's Violet entry says, Steenie bounces energetically through the forests. If the rind that peels off its body is pulverized, it can be used to treat stomach pains. I always think it's interesting when they talk about what part of a Pokemon can be used for like food or medicine, because in modern entries, they never say, oh, you just eat this Pokemon. It's like, oh, this part that falls off, you know, you just pick it up. And they're like, trying to ease off on the whole fact that they eat Pokemon thing. Zarina's Violet entry says, this Pokemon launches fierce yet elegant kicks with its long, slender legs. It views Quaquaval as its rival. Please, next season of the Pokemon anime, Zarina and Quaquaval dance battle step up style. Carcoal's Violet entry says, due to the coal tar created inside it, the heap of coal on Carcoal's back never falls apart, even when the Pokemon rolls around at high speeds. I'm glad they explained it, because I've definitely looked at Carcoal before and been like, most of it would just like go away if it got tipped over. But apparently no, it's all held together. Oricorio Bylay style Scarlet entry says, this Pokemon is incredibly popular, possibly because its passionate dancing is a great match with the temperament of Paldean people. I like that they acknowledged the fact that the Bylay style, Bylay being Spanish for dance, is based on the flamenco dance, which is a dance that comes from Spain, and Paldea is based on the Iberian Peninsula. Petalil's Violet entry says, if the leaves on its head are pruned with regularity, this Pokemon can be grown into a fine, plump shape. I just thought that this was a little funny and weird. Like, yes, you can grow your Petalil to be fine and plump. Just silly. Flapple's Violet entry says it uses its own body fluid to repair its apple. Strong Flapple that have won many battles have apples that are clay-colored all over. This is fascinating to me because it means that a Flapple that's older and been around for a while has had to repair its apple for a lot longer, and while it keeps the apple intact, the apple is getting older and thus changing color. And I really wish we could see that in the games. Squawkabilly has 4 different colors and different dex entries for each color. And it turns out these 4 different colors have differences beyond just their appearance. The green one's Violet entry says, green feathered flocks hold the most sway. When they're out searching for food in the mornings and evenings, it gets very noisy. The blue one's Violet entry says, blue-feathered Squawkabilly view their green-feathered counterparts as rivals, since the latter make up the largest, most powerful groups. The yellow one's Violet entry says, the yellow Squawkabilly are especially fierce. They've even been known to drive other bird Pokemon out of town. And then the white one's Violet entry says, though these Squawkabilly are the fewest in number, they have no trouble living in town since they blend in with the white buildings. So the green ones are the most common and have the most sway. The blue ones resent the green ones because of their larger numbers and influence. The yellow ones are jerks, and the white ones are the fewest in number, but are fine with just blending into buildings. Crabominable's Scarlet entry says, the detached pincers of these Pokemon are delicious. Some trainers bring Lechonk into the mountains just to search for them. Another instance of, oh hey, people eat some Pokemon parts, but it's the ones that have fallen off. But also, this is the first confirmation that Crabominable's pincers are delicious. We've known via previous generations that Crabrawlers are good, but now we know that Crabominables are too. Phanpy's Violet entry says, it is far stronger than it appears. If a Phanpy is swinging its trunk around and your arm gets hit by it, your arm bone will shatter. That is a little graphic and also terrifying. I like my arm bones being together, so keep your distance from the tiny deadly elephant. Donphan's Scarlet entry says, Donphan is covered in tough hide, so even being hit by a car won't faze this Pokemon. However, it is extremely susceptible to rain. This seems odd to me because I know it's a ground type and ground is weak to water, but like so many of Phanpy's dex entries talk about how it lives on riverbanks. So with just that evolution, Donphan becomes that weak to just rain? Copperage's Scarlet entry says, this Pokemon was brought to Paldea long ago by people from a faraway land. It's so strong that it can easily pull an airplane. Now your first instinct is probably, oh, that faraway land, it's gotta be Galar, right? Well, probably not. That's because Copperage's Sword entry says they came over from another region long ago and worked together with humans. Their green skin is resistant to water. So while it's possible that Copperage arrived in Paldea from Galar, it could also be the other way around, or both of them came from elsewhere. And I wonder, where is this elsewhere? Is it a region based on India because Copperaja is inspired by Indian elephants? I don't know. I'd like to find out. Knucklestack's Scarlet entry says, this Pokemon dry cures its prey by spraying salt over them. The curing process steals away the water in the prey's body. That is disturbing. I know, it's the animal kingdom. There is violence and murder everywhere. But also, is this fun little Minecraft frog draining the moisture of its prey while they're still alive? But then also it's in stark contrast to its evolution. Garganicle's Scarlet entry says, Garganicle will rub its fingertips together and sprinkle injured Pokemon with salt. Even severe wounds will promptly heal afterward. So with just one evolution, it goes from the salt violently draining the fluids from something to helping heal wounds. And that's just like, wow, this thing had therapy. Arrokuda's Scarlet entry says, Arrokuda can swim quickly, but only in a straight line. The ones that become sluggish from overeating are the first to be targeted by flocks of water. I thought Arrokuda might be in a better situation because there's no Cramorant in Paldea, but nope. Quattrol still eat it. Then its Violet entry says it takes down prey by charging into them with its hard, pointed jaw. But Arrokuda's eyesight is poor, so this tactic has a low success rate. Every time a Dex entry talks about, oh, this Pokemon attacks its prey by doing this, but actually it's kind of garbage at it. I just think that's funny. It's like, all right, throwing shade on these random Pokemon. Barraskewda's Scarlet entry says it spins its tail fins to leap from the water, then viciously bites down on Wingull flying close to the water's surface. That's a little horrifying, but also look what its Dex entry picture is. Yeah, that Wingull is moments from death. And then its Violet entry says it swims at speeds of over 100 knots and battles fiercely with pods of Finizen over prey. I just think it's interesting that Barraskewda and Finizen compete over prey. But also we just talked about how Barraskewda eats Wingull. Does that mean this adorable dolphin does too? Next up are Flabebe, Floette, and Florges. And for the first time, we have different Dex entries for each color flower. All of Flabebes just talk about basically which color flower it prefers, but Floette and Florges have some more interesting details. For Floette, it talks about how it uses the wavelengths of light that its flower emanates, and that's interesting. The red one's Violet entry says this Pokemon uses red wavelengths of light to pour its own energy into flowers and draw forth their latent potential. Then the blue one's Violet entry says it exchanges power with flowers via wavelengths of visible light. This form of Floette can sync with the wavelength that produces the color blue. Who knew Floette was so into wave physics? Then we also learned that the